When it comes to video quality, there are three main factors: distortion, sharpness, resolution, and dynamic range. How distorted are the edges of the frame? Typically, the wider the lens, the more distorted the edges are. For a dash cam, this distortion is not necessarily a bad thing because these units are not being used to record films. Still, a heavily distorted image is extremely unpleasing because of how unnatural it appears. This Uniden has considerable edge distortion when compared to my Nikon 12-24mm wide-angle lens. The distortion on this unit is even worse than a new GoPro. But it's not a problem though, since these videos are probably only going to be used for documentation purposes. The second concern is overall sharpness and resolution, and a few factors influence these characteristics. First, lens quality. This lens is an f1.8 lens, meaning its wide aperture can let in lots of light and produce sharp images. Second, the image sensor can influence resolution and image cleanness. The 1/3 inch Sony CMOS sensor is the same size sensor as the iPhone 6s. This allows for 1080p video at 30 frames per second. Pair the fairly large sensor with the f1.8 lens, the ISO noise, which is the grainy-like noise, is minimal, which allows for clearer images in low light situations, aka driving at night. Finally, dynamic range. Dynamic range is the camera's ability to capture different intensities of light in one image. Unlike the human eye, which can perceive huge differences in light, think the bright blue sky and the shade underneath a tree, cameras are extremely limited in dynamic range. It is very difficult for a camera to expose an image in which the sky is blue and the detail remains in the shadows. It is normal for a camera to make the sky look blue and everything else look black. This Uniden has okay dynamic range for a dash cam. While I would never want to use this to film videos, the dynamic range is suitable to record the relatively dark road on a bright sunny day, with blue skies and clouds. In fact, the unit has a setting called WDR, or Wide Dynamic Range. This is the same as HDR, which any photographer is familiar with. In this video, the WDR is turned off. The camera is still able to capture the blue sky with bright white clouds while capturing the detail of the motorcycle illegally passing me at a high rate of speed. But what about in poor weather conditions? Well, here the camera functions just fine in a heavy thunderstorm. Aside from the annoying windshield wipers, the raindrops on the windshield do not confuse the focus of the camera. The cars are still in focus. Even when a bright flash of lightning appears up the road, the camera is still able to capture it with okay quality. Again, I would not use this to photograph lightning, but it can capture a spontaneous strike while driving. A question many consumers have is, does this camera have night vision? No, it does not. But that is not a bad thing. You see, your headlights are lighting up the road in front of you, and there's no need for night vision while recording nocturnal drives. Night vision might come in handy while the vehicle is parked in a dark driveway and the camera senses motion or impact, but for everyday or night driving, night vision is not necessary. Notice the low noise and clear image produced while recording at 1080p 30 frames per second. Now let's switch to 60 frames per second, which changes resolution to 720p. This decreases image quality for two reasons. First, the decreased resolution captures less detail. Secondly, because the frame rate increases, so must the shutter speed and ISO. The increased ISO makes for noisier videos. Therefore, the noisier video and decreased resolution outweigh the benefits of 60 frames per second. One may argue that at 60 frames per second, you can better freeze the video and capture license plate tags, but the decreased video quality makes it nearly impossible to read the plates anyway. 720p at 60 frames per second during the day does not produce quality video either. I suggest keeping the unit at 1080p at 30 frames per second. Finally, here the unit has wide dynamic range turned on. This setting increases the dynamic range, allowing for the sky and shadows to be properly exposed, making the video even closer to what the human eye perceives. I suggest keeping the WDR function enabled. In summary, the large sensor and quality lens allow for this unit to record extremely good video for a dash cam at 1080p 30 frames per second. The dynamic range resembles that of a digital camera from 2008, but is absolutely acceptable for a dash cam in 2017.